Before we dip into Deformers, I believe we should run just briefly through these Spline commands. Okay, I'm here in my front view, you can see here. Okay, let me create some simple spline. I always prefer to use Bezier splines, they're the most powerful. Okay, so here we have some arbitrary spline, like a really ugly number 9. So this first guy here, this hard interpolation means there will be no smoothness or softness calculated in between these points. Okay, so for example, if I select all points and do a soft interpolation command, then I will get some smoothness. Okay, these next two guys, this equal tangent length and direction, well, I select a single point and with my shift key press down, I can then manipulate the one side of the tangent. So if I scale this one and hit equal tangent length, then this other one will follow, or it will get the same length. Also works for the direction. Let me hit equal tangent direction and this one will follow. Okay, really simple stuff. Let me undo that a few times. These guys right here, this join segment and break segment. So let's break a segment. Let's break a spline here. Okay. Then once you have a broken spline, you can, for example, delete the extra points and simply join the segment like this. Okay. This set first point is for selecting the first point of spline, and this reverse sequence simply reverses the point on the order on the spline, so the first point becomes the last one and vice versa. Okay, so take a look at this, how the spline goes from white to blue. That means the whitest point, the whitest part of the spline is the starting point of the spline, and the blue is the end. So if I reverse the sequence, then this point will become the first. It matters when you are generating surfaces from splines, and really simple stuff. This move down sequence, for example, you can move the sequence of the points and so on. This chamfer guy, we select, for example, this point. If I do a chamfer on this point, simply drag my mouse. Basically, is like a split command between points. Okay, can do that. The next guy is this create outline guy. And for example, let me delete this spline. It can be a really useful tool if you're building some architectural stuff. So for example, let's say you want to, as you can see now, you can't utilize these tools. Why? Because this rectangle is a parametric object. Okay, so you have to convert it by pressing C, and here you can, as we saw, set the type of the spline. For example, I can set it to be a Bezier spline, and you can immediately see the change. Okay, so if I select natural, I will select the number of calculated points in between, and let me do a hard. For example, if I say intermediate points to none, then only the original points of the spline will stay. So let me create an outline. An outline means, well, basically it means you will create an outline. Okay, so think of it as adding a thickness. For example, now if you put this line under an extrude NURBS generator and hit the Grar shading lines here options, you will see it created a surface in between. Let me go to my perspective view and you will see that. And you can, for example, use that for creating windows and walls. What is neat about this, you can always go back to your spline points and simply, my axis is hidden right now, so I'll hit Alt and D, and you can always manipulate that points later. Okay, delete this whole thing, go back to my front view. Let's do another Bezier spline, this time something like this, and let's soft interpolate all these points. So for example, this line up option is really self-explanatory. It basically lines up the points on the spline. Okay, so you get a straight line, and if you're working with Bezier spline, it also manipulates the tangents to fit. Let me cover this project option. Most of people have a really big problem with projecting the splines. Let me undo that. Create, for example, a sphere. Let me just pull it here and scale it a bit. My perspective view, just simply move it a bit further so this spline is in front of that sphere. Okay, so now if I select my spline and hit a project option, then these 2 points will be projected on surface. So if I deselect all my points, then the whole spline will be projected to a surface. So let's see how that works. So we will hit a project, and we will have an option here. For example, I really advise you to stay in this view mode, and if you hit apply, you can't really see that spline snap to surface, but you can see it in the perspective view. Okay, and we just pull all that spline, you will see that spline interpolated to this surface. If I had many more points, then the projection would be much more precise. Okay, word of caution, if, let me undo that, if there is no visible surface when you look through the spline, let's say only what is visible, only the surface that is visible to a spline itself will be calculated. Okay, so let me project this, and you can see only those points that have a sphere in its visibility, let's say, will be projected. Okay, let me undo that. Can delete this sphere. Let's now select our spline, go into our point mode, and select, for example, these 2 points. Okay, so let's say this round option will give you it will basically subdivide this area between those points. So I can say, for example, I want 10 points, and I will hit apply, and instantly I will get another 10 points. Really simple. So let me undo that. One more. You see this guy edge to spline, it's inactive. So to demonstrate how useful this tool is, for example, let's say we delete that spline. Let's say you have an object. Okay, we go to my perspective view. You see the difference. Here my display is set to lines, also here, and here is set to isoparms view with angular shading, and here is set to wireframe. Okay, so you can really ease your life a bit with those view options. So let's say you will most certainly encounter a problem when you will want, for example, let's say for some reason you really like this, you must convert it, okay, you really like this part of your geometry and you want to create this edge, you want to convert it to be a spline. So really simple, edge to spline, and it will subordinate that new spline as a child of your sphere. Okay, As you can see, we have a completely new spline. And this can be used and abused in a zillion ways for creating controls for our characters and creating new starting points for building geometry. And in so many ways that it's really difficult to explain. It's really extremely useful tool. So now when we covered these really simple tools, we can simply now dip into deformers, which are really neat and really fun, and you can really help yourself while modeling. Okay, so see you just for a second. Okay, so here we are in the same scene. I will simply delete this sphere and let me now reset my layout because I won't be working with splines no more. So this is kind of an extra information that I really like to have maximum amount of space to work with. Okay, so we'll just go to our window layout and we will hit our reset layout and it snaps right back to the default layout. Let's create a simple object. For example, we can create a cylinder, and you see here under rotation segments we can lower this count to something like 25, and we'll add some height segments to it because deformers need a bit more geometry to function really good. So let's, for example, add 5 or even 10. Okay, let's go wild. We will convert this cylinder. Okay, let's press C, and for example we can pull it just visually to be above this grid. So now here you will find deformers. You can naturally undock this also. So let's undock this. So see, there are many deformers here, and basically deformers work in this way. You will create one and simply subordinate it as a child of the object you want to affect. So now currently my cylinder is affected with this bend deformer. Okay, so here under some settings, of course you can always see settings under attributes manager. Here under strength, let's see what happens if I increase the strength. So now you can actually see the effect of deformer, which is really neat. It can help you a lot while modeling. Let me just enable these grad shading lines. I really like this mode because I can see the actual geometry. You can manipulate this deformer any way you want it in the viewport. See? You can set its mode, size and angle, and whatever you want. Okay? You can even animate all these settings, which is really powerful. Okay? So let's say for some reason you deformed your object exactly the way you want it, and you want to really flat down that information into that object. You will simply go here under objects and make a current state to object command. And see, now for this, smart enough to save your object with a deformer and create simply a completely new one that is deformed as it has deformer. So you can now delete this or leave it as a backup copy if something goes wrong and so forth. Okay, so let me undo that all. And watch what happens if I pull this bend deformer out. So it no longer is a child of that cylinder. Then simply all goes back to default state. Okay? Let me show you, for example, a rather nice deformer is, let's say this melt deformer. It's really fun. Let's create a new deformer and put it as a child. All deformers work that way, and you can see there is an instant change because this deformer by default has a strength of 25%. So you can see the difference, basically melts that geometry all the way when it reaches 100%, means everything is flat and melted. Naturally, you can play around with these settings and create some randomness and how big. For example, this setting will say how big is it when it's melted. So if we melt it all the way and increase the scale, you'll see that melted size is really great. And those deformers are really fun to work with. Okay, let's try another, right? This is really funny. Okay, we can create a shader. So we will simply create a shader, and once again make it as a child of the cylinder. And I will see, for example, again there are some settings that are common to all deformers. Is let's say strength and a few others. And if I up the strength now, my polygon, my cylinder will basically dissolve and shatter. So you can create really cool and nice effects with combination of those deformers, and can animate. You see this little dot here? This means that you can animate that value. Okay? So let us demonstrate it. Let's see this. Let's talk about briefly. We will create a simple, the most simplest animation. And here we have the time. So let's say if I control click this strength value, for example here on this dot, I created a keyframe. You see it turns red. So it says when the time is 0, the strength of this deformer is 0. So if let me scrub the time a bit. So for example somewhere around, let's say frame 60, I want this deformer to be a value of 100. You see currently this dot is, I don't know if you can see that, this dot is hollow. It means it has an animated state, but you're not currently in the frame where that state is added. You can see here this little blue box means there is an animated state on this frame 0. So let's set here a value of 100. And 100 we can some arbitrary. Okay, let's do it 100. See, now we can, if it turns yellow, it means that this is animated and it is in between states. So let's do another control click. Okay, now we basically created 2 keyframes. So this means this blue box on the frame 60 means I'm at 100%, and if I scroll back all the way to the 0, you get familiar with this control. They're basically the same as your DVD player or a similar technical device. And here under frame 0, the strength is 0. So if I press play, then I have created the most simple animation of them all. Okay, so that's your first animation. So now you can see those deformers can really be really fun. One really useful deformer is this FFD. It stands for Free Form Deformer. Okay, so let us put it under our cylinder, and here this is basically the deformer where you can enter the point mode, and it's designed to, I can now close this screen, this little window. This deformer is designed to help you manipulate many points on, for example, a dense mesh with a minimum amount of points. Okay, so for example, if I select this point, I will manipulate a whole lot of points just with a single point. It's kind of like magnet tool or soft selection tool, but it can really help you out. You see this purple box is really an area of deformer which it will work on. So anything outside of this box will not be affected. So this is the form where you can play with those points. Okay. Let me just pull that deformer to surround that object as a whole. Okay, let me go to point mode, and here you can simply manipulate this cylinder any way you want. Here you will find some useful settings. You can increase the information by adding more points. That will basically increase the resolution. Okay, so this is a really useful deformer. It can be a lifesaver in some situation. Okay, so those deformers are really neat stuff. Just play with them, absorb what they can do. They can, for example, resolve some really unbelievably complex modeling tasks with a few clicks, and people often forget that. Okay, and I think this wraps it up, and we are off to our next lesson.